Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Roger Wilkinson, and I'm the Digital Publications Editor for TASA. And I'd like to welcome you here today, and we're going to be talking about precarious employment, especially within academia. But before I do that, I'd just like to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia and recognise their continuing connection to land, waters and culture. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And today I'm talking to you from Gimoy, Wallumbara, Yidinji country in North Queensland. So today we have Christian Mauri, Ramón Menéndez, Domingo, and Lara. Sorry, I've forgotten the last name, Lara. It's just
McKenzie. Sorry, I'm not looking at my proper account.
And we've got a list of questions, about 6 or 7 or 8 questions, and Lara has agreed to go first. And so the first question is, what are our experiences as casual academics? So thanks, Lara.
Well, I could go on for a long time. So during my PhD, I did a lot of kind of casual teaching and research assistant type work, like on actual casual contracts. I haven't actually been on technically a casual contract for a while now, been more on kind of fixed term ones, but still kind of casualized, very short term contracts. So I finished my PhD in 2013, and then since then kind of had a 3-year half-time contract as a research associate where my job was technically mostly teaching, doing kind of teaching field at the kind of honours level for a while, and a little bit of sort of research writing, grant writing type stuff. Then I was still kind of working at UWA where I'm based, but had kind of more permanent work outside the university sector, working as a research officer for the Council of Australian Postgraduate Associations, which was a little bit of research work again, and also writing government submissions on higher education, and particularly on students and like inequalities in students and postgrads and precarity and all that sort of stuff. And then, yeah, picked up kind of casual research assistant type work at the university and had an honorary post here as well. So I was like in this office. And then in the last 1.5 years, I've had a 0.8 research fellow job, specifically around COVID and vaccination. And the reason I got that job is because the union had kind of at UWA arranged to have all these kind of conditions around COVID so that there wouldn't be kind of mass redundancies, which has not worked out at all recently, but for the first kind of year and a bit, it was good. And so as part of that, they could only hire people who were already staff at the university into new roles. So then I got this job that wasn't really in my field at all, but doing kind of research, interviewing, and writing up on COVID and vaccination. And then more recently, my department, anthropology and sociology at UWA, everyone's gotten made redundant. So I'm now alone in my office, and one of the last people left, even though I've got probably the shortest contract, which is interesting. So yeah, that's pretty much, I guess, where things are at the moment. And I think I have a bit to say around casualization and the way it kind of plays out, I guess, at the kind of casual level, but also kind of ongoing now as well, because I feel like that's sort of become more of a thing where ongoing contracts become more and more precarious too. And yeah.
Okay, so yes, so my experience maybe for being a casual, I guess I've been working 10 years at La Trobe, always being a casual. That maybe sums it all. After my PhD was finished in 2017, I did different casual research assistant contracts, right, in both in the Department of Social Inquiry and also in the business department, in management department, because we had something in La Trobe called social research assistant platform, and I was sort of in the pool, right? And then they called me from both departments for some time. Then after a while, working as in this kind of research, casual research assistant roles, I was offered to do some teaching in the new department where I was working. I mean, basically through an academic who recommended me, right? Like, as it happens often in the casual, as Christian Mauri has said in that article, right? The nepotism that happens, the informal way that happens to recruit casuals, right? So that was exactly how it happened. Then I ended up teaching management courses in organizational behavior, and then later on in strategic management. I was very concerned because I thought maybe this has nothing to do with I mean, my area of expertise didn't have anything to do with that, but there was a little bit of applied social psychology I could use, so that's how I survived. Progressively, the teaching was diminished in my career, right? And then I'm only now, sorry, the research was diminished in terms of research assistant, and then the teaching assistant increased, right? So that's the situation that I am now. I am actually teaching 3 courses. Luckily, 2 weeks ago, I'm teaching. I went back to sociology. It's like, I mean, methods. Some methods for the last 2 weeks that I have been doing that method, social research method. So I'm kind of happy that that happened, but it's the same kind of logic of the casual work that we are discussing here, right? So that is my. Yes, so maybe I will maybe on a more abstract level, right? I was hoping that I could talk about this as well. Maybe we will resume that in the discussion if we are maybe talking about the concrete experiences. So I will leave it maybe to Mauri, Christian, and then yeah.
Thanks, Ramon. Just before I say anything, I just want to thank Sally. Every time I interact with Sally from TASA, it's marvelous, and I recognize all the work that she does. So thank you, Sally. Hello, nice to see you. Yeah, so I just want to say from the outset that having spent 10 years working in higher education before leaving just before COVID, around the COVID period, I've seen my experiences, which I'm about to canvass, reflected in the experiences of 50-year-old women, 19-year-old men, everybody. So I wouldn't be surprised if half of what I say doesn't land with people listening, but a lot of it probably will, because I think we all share similar experiences because we're working in similar institutional contexts. So I finished my honors and then went to work for a little bit as a research assistant at Hong Kong University, helping out with a project on the belt of pleasure and sex tourism, and then came back and didn't know if I wanted to do a PhD. And lots of family members said, don't do it, go off and get a job. But I was like, no, you don't understand. I am an academic. I should be doing a PhD. So I came back and started tutoring by the age of 20. And that was in English and drama. And then from there, I taught online units in sociology and then internally in sociology. And while this was all going on, each of these jobs were not through formal job applications, which were advertised, but rather through coordinators that I knew, PhD supervisors that I knew. I'm going to call these people proxy employers, okay? Employing people through what I call the informal market, okay? So this is a place where if it were in the formal market, we will call it nepotism. Because it's in the informal market, we call it networking. Did all of that, got a whole bunch of awards for my teaching, institutional awards, early career rewards and whatnot, and then coordinated a master's unit in anti-corruption. And this was at the same time that I was doing my PhD in the job prospects of people with PhDs in Australian universities. So I was learning about the state of play and what people were basically strapping themselves in for. And then finally, I got a full-time equivalent role for the Pro-Vice Chancellor of Education. And there were lots of award-winning academics there as well. And then I noticed that the awards had nothing to do with one's employability. All of the different things which we had been told at these different conferences and career advancement and whatnot, for certificates that we do, you know, the scholarly teaching awards and whatnot, did not actually increase the likelihood of you being represented in the employment pool. And I was like, oh my God, it's true. My research is actually coming to life. All of the stuff that the Irish have been complaining about and the Canadians have been critiquing and the Americans have been shouting about is truly, properly happening here. And so when I realized that, I came to terms with the idea that being an academic, it's easy to make excuses for oneself and say, well, maybe in the future I'll be doing what I want. But then I was looking at the people who had positions that I would like, and they had their head on the chopping block. The proxy employees on whom my employment depended didn't know if they would be employed the next year or the year after that. And so I figured, well, if I do intend on actually establishing myself and having the space to write about what I want to write and to support my family when I eventually have one, higher education is perhaps not the place, at least at the moment. So I made the decision to leave and started up my own business using my sociology skills, which I'm happy to talk about. And I can just say, it's a discouraging time, most definitely, but leaving higher education and seeing that, in fact, even though I didn't realize how applicable my skills were at the time, they are indeed applicable, has been putting wind in my sails. And I've been seeing this with many other people as well. So it's exciting as well as despairing.
Now, we might move on then to a second question which has been posed, and that is, what is precarious or seasonal work in academia? So would any of you like to start? Perhaps Lara again?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I probably won't speak too much to this, but I guess in terms of like how I would want to speak about it, there's obviously kind of precarious contracts, so things like fixed term, casual, and even kind of subcontracting type relationships, which seem more and more common in academia. And I guess within that, there's sort of the hierarchies that people have kind of talked about, where your networking, nepotism and favoritism, whatever you want to call it, kind of plays out along the lines of kind of, I guess, inequalities that kind of fit within broader society. And also at the same time, this kind of shift within kind of more permanent positions to becoming more precarious in terms of not the contracts themselves, but just the way that people are, I guess, treated. Even within, say, like my current institution, the several academics who are kind of leaving were given very little notice to leave, received money in exchange for being let go quite quickly, but the actual notice period was less than my notice period in the end. So I think that situation kind of adds some, I don't know, nuance to the whole precarious work side of things. There's obviously the precarious contracts, which are very problematic and kind of you're at the bottom of the pile, but there's also other stuff going on with more permanent academics where things are kind of shifting that way as well, but in different ways. And
perhaps Ramon, you might
Yes.
we might skip Christian for this.
Yes. Yes. I think. I mean, what I understand by precarious work is basically breaking down the whole process of what it was academic role, right, between teaching, research, service, right, and basically creating alienated products of labor that they're a process that breaks down into different pieces, right? So people are insecurely, precariously employed in those places, and as in the article, I think I've done my homework for this session from McKenzie, from Lara, right? That you mentioned, like maybe 50% of people, right, in academia is casually employed, right? So as opposed to, for example, the statistics are there, maybe one third or less than 1/3 in ongoing positions, something like that, right? So it's very significant. Another, I mean, probably maybe this will have to do more with the consequences, so maybe I won't want to speak about this. Maybe I'll leave it to Christian.
So we've got a series of questions here, but in a way they're being all answered sort of collectively.
Yes.
But one of the issues is, 2 decades ago, Richard Florida wrote a book called about the rise of the professional class, and academics fitted in so neatly to this, and they were seen as creatives, and creatives were people who decided when they would work. They had a lot of autonomy. They had, it was very vibrant and all those sorts of things. Has some of that creativity and the vibrancy left the industry from your points of view?
Yeah. Yes. As a result of being encouraged to be strategic, people are thinking about their research output, what they choose to read, in terms of what is the most efficient and effective way to use one's time. Anybody here who is pursuing a PhD would have probably already been encouraged to think strategically about it. You showed me a creative project which is directed by strategy first and creative proclivity second, and I would suggest to you that that's more professional than creative, whereas in the past it likely would have been, well, this is something that interests me, and the competition wasn't so rife that you had more latitude to pursue that than you do today.
I also think it's, I guess, become like a bit of a academic class system as well, where there's certain people who do have the opportunity to do more kind of creative, interesting work. And I think that's kind of the role that I'm in right now as well. It's more, it's only writing right now. I've never had this before. Even when I was doing my PhD, I was working and being like, because I needed to earn a living. I was working on teaching and research assistant stuff constantly, and then like squeezing in my PhD into the other little gaps. Whereas now I'm spending 100% of my time pretty much writing and applying for jobs. So I think there are kind of still little pockets where you kind of get the privileged stuff that used to exist, and then everyone else is kind of stuck with these crazy workloads where they're doing massive amounts of teaching, which is obviously can be creative too, but I think the way that it currently is laid out, it is probably less than it used to be. And yeah, it's harder and harder to get into the little privilege pocket and stay there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can I just add something to that, Lara? I really like that. It's I have lots of friends who work at a place called Dingo Flower, which is a flower factory in Fremantle. And it would be completely insane if the foreman was to be conflated with the man on the factory floor, if they were just to call themselves factory workers, even though their work is so very different. They do different work. So in referring to everybody using the same job title, I think those differences are often lost. So it's a habit that we're in as academics because we've been calling ourselves that for so long. But if we lift up a hood and one thing is a boat and the other is an automobile, then perhaps vehicle is the most effective word.
Yes. I think, just talking about this division of labor in the end, right, between the creative labor and the sort of other kind of labor. I like a distinction that you make, and we were mentioning about that, and maybe the topic on nepotism, right, is not exactly how we used to understand nepotism, right? As you maybe, Christian, says in the article that is posted in the chat, right? That there is a distinction between the formal and the informal way of getting these kind of jobs, right? And the paradoxically, the sort of casual labor, how you get a casual job is through casual means, right? Through informal means of normally an email, things like that, normally something that you don't have a say. And that kind of job would essentially kind of a dead-end job that will put you in a very bad position to get any other chance of opportunity to get a job that is ongoing or full-time that happens in the formal economy or the formal sector, where you sort of apply with your skills and things like that, right? So we have the two probably bodies of people, right? That some is caught up, and a significant amount of people caught up in those kind of dead-end jobs without solution to access those others that happen in the formal economy, where probably processes are much more transparent and much more right, but who can get that, right? And maybe 5-10%, and normally we're probably in a circle of I mean, obviously there may be exceptions and things like that, but as a pattern, right? Yeah, so I think maybe that happens. I mean, that might have to do with some other questions that we may have about the creativity, creative economy and things like that. But yeah.
Now, I think Lara mentioned the fact that you're not teaching at the moment, and I think it is the case, and certainly it's become so since COVID, that a lot of the teaching is more remote and it's more mechanical in a sense. So I can't ask you or Christian at the moment, but Ramon, what's your connection in a sense to students? Do they pick up that that people are casuals and a part of the Precarious, or do they draw upon your intellectual labor and so forth, or do they see you as in a more what's the word? Do they just see you as someone to draw upon for their degree?
Well, I don't know, because I haven't asked them. And the brand is sorry, I don't really know. I don't know what they might think about that, but I think, I mean, the consequences of casual labor probably is that maybe a lot of casuals are teaching maybe subjects that are not, like in my case, right? Like they are not experts on that, maybe to liberate work for the full-time workers, right? I guess some sort of outsourcing. And there is this kind of rhetoric in probably in universities that they put the students at the center of what they do, right? Essentially what they pay in the tuition and etc., right? But that doesn't always happen, I think, because probably what you would like as a student, for example, when I studied it was a totally different model and a totally different time and a totally different country, right? In the antipodes, but in Spain, I always had the people leading in their fields. There was nothing, and probably students don't get that at this point. In terms of teaching. So I think to some extent that might be a bit unfair. Although that is not to say that probably casuals are overqualified, and this is in the literature as well, that we are lacking skills. I think maybe we are having more skills sometimes than the subject or coordinators, etc. Right? So it's not. I mean, that doesn't mean that they're getting bad education, but maybe not getting the sort of person that maybe, and this is maybe different in different institutions, right? Like, for example, if you compare Trobe University with Melbourne University, or the so-called G8 in Australia, right? That might be different and might not be the case. But I don't know, because I don't think students they talk about much about this, and then they have a extreme load of heavy load of assignments. This is more concern about the assignments than any other thing. Anyway, yeah.
Yes, Christian. Yeah. And Lara.
Yeah, it's often amazing seeing the gap between what students think is going on and what's going on. I think students are often oblivious. I remember when we striked at Murdoch, the students were amazed. They were like, but we're paying for the service. They couldn't wrap their head around why the tutors were striking. I have a friend who's beginning his studies at UWA this year, and he has no idea. He's doing sociology. He has no idea what he's headed for. He does not know that they've just, there's got to be a stronger word than decimated their sociological staff. I know that lots of sociologists are fans of The Simpsons. Something that it reminds me of is, there's an episode in The Simpsons where a doctor is giving Lisa all of these pills, or a man in a white coat is giving her all of these pills. and somebody's like, "Thank you, doctor," and he's like, "Oh, I'm not a doctor." It's it's similar, like you're teaching people all of this stuff. Imagine you're teaching history and they're like, "Oh, thank you, you're such a great historian." It's like, I'm not a historian. That's not my background. It's, they don't know, that they're oblivious. Young students will refer to us as professor because they've been watching Spider-Man their whole life.
Well, I think part of that's kind of our fault as well, because there's this sense of kind of shame as well when you are in that kind of role that, you know, you should be doing better. So people don't necessarily mention their own kind of employment situation to their students, which, you know, is fair enough. But also, I guess, like within my own department, anthropology and sociology, where with people being made redundant, I was really kind of heartened by the fact that students were so active, like the undergrads and postgrads especially, just were so active and so kind of passionate about their degrees and about the disciplines that they were part of. So I think there are definitely students who have a really good understanding of like the structures that have kind of created this, and perhaps kind of learning anthropology, sociology, they were maybe a bit more primed to have a good understanding of how those things worked. So yeah, I think, I don't know, I disagree a little bit, I guess, but I think they are more aware than we give them credit for sometimes.
Now, one of the things you mentioned before, Lara, was that you spend a lot of time writing for jobs. So I was wondering if you might describe what are the qualities that you put into your job applications, and then move across to Christian, and you might be able to pick up on some of that. You might be able to comment, Christian, on some of those qualities, because Christian has just recently started his own business, I think, as a consultant sociologist, maybe something like that. Christian will be able to tell us. So, Lara, could you just describe the sorts of skills and qualities that you put in, that you describe or construct or invent in the jobs that you're going for?
I feel like I shouldn't be giving career advice to anyone, but I guess I have a fairly kind of generic letter that I adjust for whatever job I'm applying for, that kind of goes through, you know, depending on what I'm applying for, kind of general interests and fit with the role, and then kind of research background and different kind of capacities I've worked in on projects, teaching skills and service and publications and grants, and, you know, so basically just demonstrating that you've done everything, and then but then knowing that everyone else who's applying has also done all those things, so it maybe isn't enough. I think my main strategy in terms of that's been most effective in terms of applying for jobs is just to kind of forget about it as soon as you've released it out into the wild, and just don't have any expectations at all. Mm-hmm. The part I find much more difficult is interviews, because then you do get invested in wanting to have that particular role, and you kind of research the department and like look at all the different people who work there and think about how exciting it'll be, and, you know, look up how expensive rentals are around there and that kind of thing. So I find that kind of side of things a lot more time consuming than actually applying for roles, especially if you're applying for lots of similar roles, like lecturing roles. They're all pretty similar. You can mostly put in a pretty similar application with some adjustments and get an interview. I don't know if that's the advice that everyone would be giving, but it's worked fairly well for me in terms of interviews. And yeah, the actual interview part takes kind of days of preparation and kind of emotional investment and that sort of stuff. So I think that's been a lot harder, that side of things.
One of the what I was thinking about was some of the more broader issues around the rise of the neoliberal worker and the qualities that neoliberal workers are encouraged to develop, like team playing and being flexible and being able to think on your feet and all those sorts of things. Are they things that you consciously are trying to develop at the moment, or not so much?
I don't know, because I feel like it really depends on the interview panel. Sometimes you'll get an admin kind of professional staff member who really wants to ask you what your strengths and weaknesses are and all that sort of more corporate stuff. But I think if you're looking at like academics who are evaluating what you're doing, they don't necessarily care about that stuff as much. And I think you need to kind of perform being excited about academia and your career trajectory, even if you're not really feeling it. But I think collaboration and that kind of language, yes. The part I always struggle with is whether to mention my involvement with the union in my applications, because I wonder if that would kind of disqualify me in some places, and in other places maybe not. I kind of tend to just try and be honest. And I don't think it's had any particularly obvious negative effects in terms of getting interviews, as far as I could tell.
All right, Christian, would you like to just tell us some of your good recent news and perhaps how it might impact on others and seeking employment in the higher education industry, or in the broader sociological industry that I guess now is starting to take place outside of academia?
Thanks, Roger. I'd love to. I'll just say a couple of things, just because I know that there are some aspiring academics listening to this. So Guy Standing referred to one of the characteristics of the precariat as unpaid work for labor. So some of you will be spending more time applying for jobs than you will in the classroom teaching, and you won't be getting paid for this time. It's so demoralizing. The meanest email you could receive, aside from ghosting, is do not respond to this email after you've put your heart and soul into it. Please, I know it's difficult not to become depressed, but it's not your fault. You could be awesome, you could be spectacular, and if they don't buy it, it's probably not your fault. Okay, when people say they spend 10 seconds looking at a resume as if that's something to brag about, that's not a serious person you're talking to. That's somebody under institutional conditions for efficiency. So it's not your fault. Believe in yourself, please. Otherwise, heartbreak is around the corner, and I know that you're clever, so you're better than that. Okay. So I left higher education, didn't know what I wanted to do. I experienced a kind of identity death because people still refer to me as an academic. People at my old university still refer to me as a colleague because they can't wrap their head around the fact that I would leave. But what I basically did was I realized that people writing biographies and memoirs are writing books that aren't being read. And I realized that people writing books like this are being sold for a lot of money, not often being read. So I said, well, what's a good way to get this kind of stuff read? So all that I really did was, I mean, there's more to it than this, but I took the qualitative interviews that I would do with people, and I hooked up with a local illustrator who draws in the style of Beatrix Potter. And I took these interviews from old Sicilian men and from just local parents who have like 6 children or whatnot. And I took those interviews, cleaned them up, and put them to illustrations. And everybody was voracious for it. When I started this business in December, I expected not to make any money till May. I now have to put a waiting list in place due to there being so many clients. And I'm thinking that when I do expand, the silver lining is that there are so many talented anthropologists and sociologists out there who have such skills that I can hook up with and work with, which is very, very exciting. So it's just, when you're in academia, you get to the top of your education, which is a level 10 qualification, which is your PhD, and you think you're at the top of the pyramid, and then you realize it's an hourglass, and you're actually at the bottom again in the academic work market, which is very demoralizing. Leaving and realizing, oh, no, actually, these skills, irrespective of whether or not I receive a job offer, can actually, be valued by people. Another way to put it is, when I was in higher education and I would describe to people that I was an academic, they'd recognize the status and they'd appreciate the status, but be intimidated. They wouldn't necessarily understood what I actually did. Now, when I tell people, oh, I help 6-year-old children appreciate what kind of life their parents had or their great parents had, they get it. People get it. And I think this is what we like as sociologists anyway. We like people getting what we're doing rather than being perturbed and intimidated by our status. So it's just been marvelous. I did not realize, and I know everybody has different opportunities based on privilege and so on and so forth, but I'm not alone here. I've been speaking to other people who have left higher education and have been astounded that it was easier out than in. So do not be perturbed. Do not think that life ends if you decide to leave higher education, because sometimes life is elsewhere. Oh, that sounded grim, didn't it? This is supposed to be encouraging.
Yes, very, very much so. Now, I think maybe if Ramon or Lara don't have any immediate things to say, we might open it up to questions and discussion. And obviously we can come back in as we see fit. So can I open it up for questions? Yes, Sally.
Can I start?
Yes.
I just, your business, Christian, sounds very exciting. So are you, what's the model? You're presenting research in a different format, in a layperson with pictures format. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, so there's two parts, process and product. So people can make it their whole life without having an opportunity to talk about their own accomplishments without feeling like they're bragging. It's just like how you can make it your whole life without somebody throwing a surprise birthday party for you. People really like somebody coming to their house, cooking lunch with them, going for a walk, having a glass of wine, and them just talking about their best experiences. That's the process. So I say the process is for the client, whereas the product, I take those stories, and people think that a biography is where you went to school and what your job is. But the interesting stuff is, your first kiss, your first fight, when you accidentally walk out of the bathroom in school and toilet paper was still on your shoe. This is the rich stuff. This is the stuff that people put dimples on your cheeks when you read about it, right? So I take that and I put it into a book where each story is just a page and a half, right? So that people can pick it up, have a look at it, and there's illustrations and help them understand. It really is, it sounds basic, doesn't it? It sounds so basic, but people were so hungry for it because the alternative is going to a biographer for $40,000 and they send you a questionnaire. So it's really using your skills as a sociologist or sitting down, having a chat with somebody and realizing themes that they might not spot themselves and putting it into a consumable, I hate the phrase content as well, into material that people, even kids, can read. Because I know as sociologists, we're all afraid of intergenerational memory loss. You lose the ability to tell how significant your historical moment is if you never actually spoke to your grandparents or your parents. So this is a way to hopefully put up a good fight against that as well.
Fantastic.
Any questions from the audience?
Looks
Yeah,
like Jai's got one.
Yes, I've got one. One of the things that I see that the casual staff have got, I've got a couple of decades of workplace experience in youth work and so forth, and I've brought that in and then stay casual, and you sort of drift between industry and casual academia. I don't think I'm alone. I think there are plenty of other people in that boat. The full-time academics, what I'm seeing with upward credentialisation is that we're increasingly moving towards people who have academic careers and don't get that industry experience. And so, how can we promote these benefits that casuals bring to institutions? Because that seems to be getting forgotten in this picture that, oh yeah, well, we're this pool that we can draw on, and yeah, we can give PhD students a bit of casual work to give them some experience, but there's more to that picture. So yeah. How can we promote ourselves, I think, a bit better and those upsides of this?
So you mean give status to it? Well, not status per se, but make it highlight the value of it. Yeah, well, I mean, yeah.
I bring content to courses from industry background that the academics don't have. They haven't worked in industry to be able to go, oh yeah, here's the photos from when we were doing this job. And I know that there's an element of that doing practical research is an important element of being an academic, and that does give you some contact with the real world. And there is a community service element to that. So full-time academics do actually have that built into their workload model, that they do have to have that. As casuals, it's a thing that we bring to the workplace, but there's nothing that sort of says, okay, we're an infill. We're generally somebody we need somebody to do this job. And so I guess I'm trying to look for ways to see how that can be valued within the workplace model, so that there is some, and we've got this drive towards workplace integrated learning. You know, and I can say, well, yeah, I've got hundreds of workplace contacts all around the place. So they're not sort of exploiting that as effectively as I would see.
So in a way, what you're saying is that universities and certainly academics should be using casuals and marketing the skills that casuals have from outside and making, in a way, that a saleable commodity. I hate the language, but we've already moved that way. That's the way that university managements think.
Yeah, and I know we don't want to turn universities into TAFE colleges, you know, where workplace training institutions, but there is a drive towards workplace integrated learning, and students are going to pick up on this thing too of, yeah, you know, it's really nice to hear from a professor, but we also do like to hear from people who have this life experience that then has been brought into the academy and is a contribution. You know, whose role that is, it's kind of hard from a casual academics point of view to, you know, I can sell myself, but I can't sell all of us as casuals and say, hey, look, you know, we are bringing a lot of cultural capital from a whole lot of different backgrounds.
I'm sensitive to the fact that I've spoken quite a bit, so I have an answer, but I'll wait in case somebody else has to say.
Oh, you go. I'm still collecting my thoughts a bit.
Ramon, have you any thoughts?
Maybe I'll go because I'm in the business department and I'm in between Dr. Jager and Mr. Hyde. So, yeah, thank you, Jay, right? Isn't it? Jay, yeah.
Right, yeah.
I have two questions or comments on your comment, right? I wouldn't have a problem with that, but if casuals were remunerated by their initiative, which they are not, because they don't participate in subject design or content design or research, or they are not even in the departmental meetings, right? So for them to take more aspects of the jobs that are created, and then they are about engaging industry, right, and engaging the different aspects of the real world in the university, they should be much better remunerated. Because otherwise we will make it into a situation that you get more load of work for no pay, and then we continue with the debate of that. That said, I think that maybe it will be beneficial for particularly the students to get more internship and more chances of the labor market and more real experience in connection to the labor market, because many are certainly worried about their job prospects. But the sort of principles of an educational institution and a business kind of institution or industry institution many times clash. Is the same way because, why some research is funded, maybe there is some profit behind that, but maybe we need some kind of other research that question many of the things and this is a long time debate, and my ways around that, but the sort of principles of the educational institution, and I see this a lot in business, because I'm teaching basically a strategy, and we have that paper from Foucault, right? The subject on, well, I don't know, that in the end they talk about, it talks about a strategy and commercial strategy and how that is kind of a form of governmentality, right? Of emphasizing those kind of values of, it's not only at the level of the workers, but also at the level of the competition between different firms and organizations and strategizing and all that kind of thing. I don't know, this is more complex than I'm not just saying maybe these two comments for that, but yeah, maybe that is happening as well on the level, not of the casuals, but maybe this kind of rhetoric about industry engagement and impact and all that kind of thing, right? That there is in universities. Yeah, if that happened, that should be debated, and also maybe casuals, if they do it, they have to be remunerated for that, which they are not for a lot of and it's I don't think it's so much a matter of selling the skills, because the casuals have a lot of skills, as much as a matter of acknowledgement of those skills that is not happening in a very basic level. Yeah, anyway.
Yeah, thanks, Ramon. I'll just quickly answer. By the way, Jai, my favorite cousin's name is Jai. It's one of my favorite names. I rarely see it. I think the ship has sailed, mate, because what I think has happened is we've gone through a process of proletarianization, by which I mean people's professional skills have become less relevant in the face of them just becoming boots on the shop floor, which is why you can teach something which you have no background in whatsoever, because your skills, your literal knowledge is not as relevant as your availability and credentials and their ability to basically say, well, at least I'm allowed to employ them because they're a PhD candidate or they have a PhD. So there's been a proletarianization. And what happens when you get a proletariat, people who are selling their labor for wages, is you also get a lumpen proletariat, which is people who want those wages, who want to sell their labor, but can't because they're not let into this labor market, which means that people over here are always replaceable by people over here. Add precarity to that, which means that we've lost the securities which have been won throughout the 20th century, means that the people over here are more replaceable than ever by the lumpen proletariat. This is what's happened in higher education. So for people in the lumpen proletariat to say, well, how do I become part of the proletariat? Or for people who are here, who are completely replaceable, saying, how do I make myself more valuable, is to miss the point that actually there's something bigger going on, which has been a kind of procedure of making people replaceable, which is a dilution of the recognition of professional skills. It's kind of like, I won't make any more analogies because I'll just confuse it if I do, but I trust you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think the two of you just kind of covered what I wanted to say on that particular question, but kind of jumping off what Christian just said. I think like a lot of it is the way that the system's set up in terms of creating new PhDs and then kind of what to do with them. Because say I was putting in a DECRA application a couple of years ago. I wanted to create a role for a research assistant or, well, ideally a postdoc, but there wasn't anywhere near the budget for that, to assist on my research. And they kept pushing me and pushing me and pushing me to put in for a PhD scholarship because it's so much cheaper, saying, you know, you can get an entire scholarship for the cost of like 0.2 of an actual contract of paying someone, you know, to do the work, and they've already got experience and a PhD maybe. So that system and kind of all the funding constraints going on within Australian higher education just create this like oversupply, I guess, of PhD students and recent PhDs. And then once you get to kind of the early career researcher level, it costs, I think, about probably 4 or 5 times as much to actually employ someone to do that work at kind of level A, level B academic, and no one has that money. So it doesn't happen, and the opportunities dry up, or you get kind of stuck in professional roles that are paid at much lower rates. So yeah, I think that kind of feeds into this whole system that we're talking about as well. And actually, fun fact, well, not fun, but when I was working for the Council of Australian Postgraduate Associations, I did kind of a survey of the amount of students who have scholarships as PhD students, and as far as I could tell, because the statistics are a bit blurry, and it's only really counts kind of government grants and not ARC grants and kind of other external grants, it's about 1/3 of postgraduates that have scholarships, stipends. So there's a lot of unpaid PhD students as well.
Okay, now we're getting up towards the, we've got about 10 minutes left, but someone before said we're living in discouraging times. And I was wondering if we might, one of the things that I think unites all sociologists is we love the sociological imagination and what it can do. And so how do we kind of use our sociological imagination and turn this around initially for ourselves to create, whether we're inside academia or outside of it, how do we create, you know, and bring back some of that meaningful, that meaning that comes from being able to just sit and read a book or write on what you want. How do we do that? And what might it look like? And perhaps if there's anyone in the audience that you've got something to say, we'd like to hear from you there. No?
Okay, I can give it a go. Just 2 more things for Jai. Jai, if you get the opportunity or asked to strike, because otherwise, if you say, what can we do when you're not even striking or you're crossing picket lines, you know. And the second thing is people take you more seriously than that money. You can't give your skills away for free. People will just treat you as spam. But if you ask somebody with a lot of money for a lot of money, they'll take you seriously. It's one of those counterintuitive things. So that's a start to be taken more seriously. It's so crazy how that works, but that seems to be how it works. In terms of getting the sociological imagination back in, I think part of it is just realizing that it's kind of like the university is, I don't know, the wolf and we're like Romulus and Remus, you know, it's like we're sucking on the teat, but we never removed ourselves from the teat. Just realizing that you can actually read this stuff and do this stuff without it having to be tied to your profession and to your institution, it can be so liberating, just giving yourself permission not to be strategic. Makes reading fun again, which is wonderful. It gets rid of some of that that cortisol streaming through your mind when you're supposed to be relaxing with a cuppa.
I guess more in the kind of collective level as well. I think, political change, striking, and also I guess forming kind of I hate the word networking, but forming kind of relationships within your discipline and kind of pushing for change in that way, like realizing you're all kind of in this together. And that's, I guess, again, one of the things that's kind of struck me with my department being made redundant is that it kind of did bring people together in ways that they maybe weren't before, because people's interests weren't necessarily aligned 100% before, whereas now they were. So I think kind of collective action really is kind of the way to make the work as a whole within academia, not academic work as can exist wherever, more meaningful for everyone.
I think maybe my turn. Yes, I basically agree with Christian and Lara. Yes, I don't know. I was waiting when all the casual problem happened, and particularly when that happened in Western University, right? Your university, Lara. But I didn't see like calls for real strikes happening, right? Like, I mean, classes didn't stop. We all continue. I think, I don't know, to some extent, I mean, this is maybe a word that has been used as the word solidarity and that kind of thing, but for it to really happen, right, and to really stop a system because our workmates are suffering, there has to be more of that, I think, and particularly from the ongoing workers as well, which I think they don't really pay attention for the casual issues. So I'm still waiting for that call to a strike, and I haven't seen it. And it's one of the work rights that we have, right? And I think because of the precarious work, maybe we cannot exercise that right. We are more in danger if we exercise it. So, but yeah, I agree, basically agree that is the solution. And also maybe the chances to have a better quality of life and have more free time and have a cuppa and have a writing and watch a movie or whatever and have more free time. Yes.
Also get people to speak for you. There are really loud and powerful people out there who, if you give them a platform, they will take it. Like I organize political events in Fremantle, and I'll get like writers for on higher education. I'll get previous like disgruntled pro vice chancellors to come and talk and whatnot. So it looks good for you because you're organizing these events and they're saying all the things that you could never get away with saying anyway, and they have more status, so they're more heard. So that's an alternative. Get on your hands and knees and let somebody stand on your back.
Yes, but I also think that the casuals doing that are very in severe danger if they can pinpoint. Like when I got invested with the, for example, a casual network in my uni, I wanted it almost to be anonymous. Like we are a collective that we are putting these demands, because if they start pinpointing, then the disciplinary actions may take place, and you know that. And some sort of collective action that has to protect the casual worker, I think is important, because and that's the fear and why it doesn't happen as well, I think. But anyway, I don't know. I don't know about activism, to be honest. But.
Okay, what we might do is start to call it to a close, but I'd like to thank all of the speakers, and I guess encourage everybody to use that sociological imagination, I guess, to in a way reinvent themselves. And certainly we'd like to hear some of your experiences about how you are reinventing yourself. So unless there's any other comments, we might call it quits.
Can I just quickly?
Yes.
Sorry, just have a few comments. I don't want to hold everyone's time. Yeah. So I'm currently working as a data analyst in a medical company after my PhD in sociology. So I basically have some kind of data analytics skills, but I'm still applying for jobs in universities. Just kind of fancy the environment of working in universities with academia. I think it's totally different vibe to work with people in university. Yeah. So what I want to say is just yeah, for people like me not working in the universities anymore, I feel like even the casual or seasonal job is still quite something I would like to do, to consider. It's just the way of life, maybe. So yeah, I guess it's sometimes just a reflect on that. I just feel like if you choose something to do and just get to the best part of it, just to, I don't know, I just feel like I wish I would do a casual academic job, just kind of like doing that. Yeah. Although I will keep getting like pay rise in my current company, I feel like still, yeah, just kind of, yeah.
There is definitely something of the pull of towards working in a university. I guess I'm not sure if there's a lot of memory there that we have these wonderful experiences, but I know very much from a niece of mine who works in the medical industry is the money that they get is just phenomenal, 2 or 3 times what a professor would get. And, you know, that money is not to be sneezed at, I guess. So maybe for the moment, I guess the main point is that young career academics are looking towards other industries and other ways of creating a creative income and a creative life for themselves into the future.
Sorry, I have to hold you back for a few minutes. I have a quick question. So just to follow up on what my colleague just asked, if you are a new researcher, you're a PhD candidate and you're looking forward to getting a research assistant job, or if you even want to go into industry and get into something that is related to your area, but you don't have experience in that, how do you present yourself to get such opportunities to be in industry while you're studying?
In my experience of the people that I've known, it's with a drink in hand at a party rather than in a formal setting, in an office chair. It's changing the frame. If they're viewing you as a potential person to employ, they're viewing you next to all of the other competition. Whereas if you're sitting next to them and you're having a nice conversation, you're getting to know them as a friend first. This is the networking that I was talking about before, right? People, it's just a different frame that people view this kind of work in. So in my experience and from what I've watched, it's when you're not looking for a job, but you're making friends with people who can give it. that we won't end up getting one, rather than when you're looking and you're going with cup in hand.
Thank you.
Did you have something to add, Ramon? It looked like you did.
Yes, maybe for the research assistant, I mean, trying to enhance your skills. I've done a lot of courses to do that kind of thing. I mean, I guess course method courses and things like that. Also, maybe by practice if you're doing some kind of research degree, also the hands-on practice, I think is very valuable. And yes, apart from that, I think it's also an important point, but yes. Now I think I see it more difficult now with all this online, because before we used to go much more to the department and people saw you there, right? But I think that now there's one more wall for that informal thing happening. Yeah. But but it's still possible. I think I've seen. I mean, it's much more vibrant than before the height of the pandemic. So yeah, in the uni, I mean.
I think on that note, we definitely will call it to a halt. So I'd like to thank the three speakers once again, Ramon, Christian, and Lara, for their interesting discussions, and all coming from quite different points of view. So thank you so much, and good afternoon, everybody.